Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Ryan Pronzinski of Christ Lutheran Church in Michigan Center, Michigan, and this is my Chair Chat Daily Devotion for Monday, June 22nd, 2020. Peace be with you. These video devotions are intended to help you engage your life of faith during these hard times. And so with engagement in mind, I encourage you throughout these videos, especially today's. I think it's going to be a little longer due to there being 3 readings and other reasons, to take time throughout these videos to pause and reflect, journal, have conversation with those around you. Come back to the videos if you need to. You don't have to watch them all in one sitting. With engagement in mind, I also encourage you to leave constructive comments, questions, or prayer requests in the comments section below. And I know that I promised to get to those in the following videos. I also would encourage you all to have healthy dialogue and even pray with and for one another on this digital platform where you can communicate with one another. The readings that get selected for each day, or I should say are kind of chosen for me, that I just put forth, they come from the Daily Revised Common Lectionary, which is a church calendar reading schedule, and it can be found online. The readings for today are Psalm 6, Micah chapter 7, verses 1 through 7, and Revelation chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. Before I get to the readings themselves, as always, I'd like to invite anybody out there who's watching these videos to join us for worship on Sundays at Christ Lutheran Church by joining us online with our Facebook live stream. We have been live streaming our services on Sunday mornings at 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time using Facebook Live, and we will continue to do so. The link to those videos is in the description below, and even if you can't come and join us live, please hear the good news when you can. I try and preach things that will help you see where God is in your life and bless you. So if you like these videos, I hope that you can join us for Sunday as well. And in time, hopefully we can expand on these videos and Sunday online worship to incorporate more things as well, where we can get to know you and you can get to know us, who participate in these various ministries of Christ Lutheran Church. A quick note that's just different for this video than from others. I don't want you to look ahead yet, but I just want you to know up front that I am posting another link in the description for this video. It's a YouTube video that gives kind of a brief overview of the book of Revelation, the first 11 chapters, and kind of the thrust of the whole book as well. And I'm going to encourage you later on in this video to go ahead and watch that, but just so that you already have a heads up and know that it's there. Also, the readings themselves are listed in the description too. All right, I think that's all the introductory, welcomey stuff for the video. On to the first reading, which comes from Psalm chapter 6, which reads as follows. O Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger, or discipline me in your wrath. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am languishing. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are shaking with terror. My soul also is struck with terror. While you, O Lord, how long? Turn, O Lord, save my life. Deliver me for the sake of your steadfast love. For in death there is no remembrance of you. In Sheol who can give you praise? I am weary with moaning. Every night I flood my bed with tears. I drench my couch with weeping. My eyes waste away because of grief. They grow weak because of all my foes. Depart from me, all you workers of evil, for the Lord has heard the sound of my weeping. The Lord has heard my supplication. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies shall be ashamed and struck with terror. They shall turn back and in a moment be put to shame. I feel like I can keep my... Here ends the reading. Sorry, started reading into my notes. So, last line, and in a moment be put to shame. The end. Okay. I feel like for this psalm I can keep my reflections relatively brief for a psalm, because I imagine that we can all live into this psalm today, and this is what I mean by that. We are all asking the question right in the heart of this psalm: how long, O Lord? How long, O Lord? How long, O Lord, will we be anxious about the simplest things, some which we even miss and never gave a thought to and just did them, like shaking hands or giving hugs or being around groups of people? How long, O Lord, will we be treated, or will people be treated as less than and inferior? Be treated like a disease or a problem or a criminal instead of a child of God created in your image. How long, O Lord, will we be out of work, out of money, out of patience, out of peace? How long, O Lord, will life feel so uncertain and unsettled? I think by now you get the point. That is not an exhaustive list of how longs, but we all are wondering, how long, O Lord? And so what is the good news of this psalm as we are all left longing and wondering? What is the good word today? Well, this is what I hear from the psalm. Quote, "The Lord has heard has heard our supplication. The Lord accepts our prayer." End quote. That is to say, who you are and what you need is accepted, heard, seen, and supported by God. God will act on your behalf. Night will become day. Loss will become gain. Death will become life. So what are you longing for right now? What stories of God arriving in these moments of longing might give you hope? As you, like me, sit, wait, and long for God's arriving. Is it the story of Abraham finally being given a son in Isaac? Is it I should say Abraham and Sarah, because technically Ishmael came first, so my apologies, but I think you get what I'm saying. Is it the story of the Israelites being freed from slavery and delivered through the parting of the Red Sea? Is it Daniel in the lion's den, where he comes out unharmed, or even the fiery furnace too, with Rashak, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Is it David and Goliath, knowing that even when you feel small and weak, that by God's grace you can take down the fearful and mighty? Is it Elijah and the widow? If you've been watching these videos, you know what I'm talking about. Or for all of us who call ourselves Christian, those who place our hope, our trust, our faith, our life in the person of Jesus, is it Jesus and the cross and death and resurrection? Is it this story that gives you hope? That God will arrive, will hear your prayers, your supplications, and will act. God bless you as you wait and long for God's arrival and wait for God's deliverance, because we have a whole host of stories and people. We Lutherans call them saints. Even the writer of Hebrews calls them saints who have gone before us to show us that God is faithful to deliver. God is faithful to arrive and to deliver. So how long, I don't know, but God comes. God will come. God give you peace and hope in that truth today. On to Micah chapter 7, verses 1 through 7. Woe is me, yikers! For I have become like one who after the summer fruit has been gathered and the vintage has been gleaned, finds no cluster, nothing to eat. There is no first ripe fig for which I hunger. The faithful have all disappeared from the land, and there is no one left who is upright. They all lie in wait for blood, and they hunt each other with nets. Their hands are skilled to do evil. The official and the judge ask for a bribe, and the powerful dictate what they desire, and they thus pervert justice. The best of them are like a briar, the most upright of them a thorn hedge. The day of their sentinels, of their punishment has come. Now their confusion is at hand. Put no trust in a friend. Have no confidence in loved ones. Guard the doors of your mouth from her who lies in your embrace. For the son treats the father with contempt. The daughter rises up against her mother, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Your enemies are members of your own household. But as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. Here ends the reading. As I read this, the very first thing that I think, or I should say I thought as I read this earlier, is, boy, this sure sounds a lot like Jesus' own words that we just heard if you worshiped with us yesterday on Sunday from Matthew chapter 10, right? Son against father, daughter against mother, son-in-law against father-in-law, daughter-in-law against mother-in-law, etc. So that may be in part why this reading is showing up today in the Daily Revised Common Lectionary. As I read through this the second time, I also hear a longing that exists in Micah's words and in Micah's heart, just like the psalmist. So there's a connection there too. But for us, all this talk of hostility and division should feel very familiar to us, right? Because we live in such divided times. The idea that you might not speak with or spend time with family or friends because of a myriad of reasons, right, exists today. We all seem to be hiding in our silos, too afraid to truly see and be seen, hear and be heard, be vulnerable and empathetic, and seek to understand and validate even if we don't agree. Right? It feels more like Micah's words today than what I just said about empathy and validating and understanding. And so, these words do feel very descriptive of our times, at least as I'm hearing them and trying to kind of change the angle at which we look at them, right? Because we may not be longing for fruit from our own vineyard, right, as Micah is saying, that we have shared with others and now there is none left for us. None of us, I think, have vineyards. If you have a vineyard out there, God bless you. I love grapes. I love wine. Power to you. However, to make this more broad, there have been, and possibly still are, shortages of toilet paper, cleaning supplies, and at the very least, but these are important things, a shortage often of patience and kindness. And many people seem to be trying to dole those out, but it's in short supply, and by the time they get done doling them out and people take them like gold, there seems to be none left for us, or me, or you. And frankly, I know I can relate to the statement, or at least the feeling of it, whether it's true or not, it's perceived this way at times, of people today. Quote, They all lie in wait for blood. Yeah, no one's trying to kill me. I'm thinking of this more metaphorically. They all wait, to harm. Because at a time when we honestly should be seeking to come together right now, to work together, to listen, to hear and be heard, to see and be seen, to validate and understand, even if we strongly disagree, it feels like many simply want to lie in wait until they can point the finger and say, "Ha! I've finally got you. I've finally got you." Makes me think of that briar and thicket imagery Micah used, right? Instead of there being robust dialogue right now that promotes unity and understanding and growth, I would even say hospitality is what I was longing for yesterday, and that type of language, and sacrifice, compassion, right? Instead of these things, we have trite tweets and petty posts that only increase our division and anxiety. If you haven't done so, stop doing social media other than maybe these videos, because I try and make them encouraging and hopeful. But I'm talking about all the other garbage out there. You know what I mean. Truly our hands, our mouths are skilled to do evil, as Micah says. That shouldn't be so hard to reckon when you think about tweets and trite posts that people put on Facebook and Twitter and other things. And when we do these evils to make ourselves feel better or justified, we pervert justice, right, and peace. And everybody suffers as a consequence. Saying, "Ha, I got you," brings no healing. It brings no reconciliation. It brings no unity. It doesn't even bring justice necessarily. Even when people need to face consequences for doing a wrong, oftentimes the punishment that people who have committed wrongs do end up being more than the crime that they committed, the wrong that they did. I know I was talking with my mom the other day about the concept of restorative justice, right? If you want to go down a rabbit hole that's really big and beautiful and a little scary too, because it's not what we're doing right now, look up the concept of restorative justice versus what we're doing right now, especially our society. But yeah, when we try and just make ourselves feel better and point the finger, we pervert peace and justice, and everybody suffers. Not just those who have done wrong, but even the people that have felt wrong. It doesn't help anybody to have an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth, right? That doesn't bring healing. It just brings more harm. As Jesus himself said, those who live by the sword die by the sword, and that doesn't have to be a physical sword. That can be violent, cutting words as well. And so yes, woe to us. Woe to me, says Micah, but woe to us who are divided and disparaging right now. It truly can, in these moments, at times, feel like the faithful have indeed left the land. So then where does our hope lie then? Right? Because I just painted a pretty bleak picture, but I'm just doing so in the words of Micah. Right? Well, Micah, we, like Micah, are encouraged to reply to this hard, divided time with these words. We look to the Lord. We wait for the God of our salvation. God will hear us. And what I hear in these words, I tweaked the pronouns a little bit in those sentences from Micah, but what I hear is that God remains faithful, even when we are unfaithful. And that's not unique to Micah. Just read your Bible. That statement comes up all the time throughout the Bible. And so what does this look like for Micah and God willing for us, right? This God who is faithful even when we are not. I'm going to continue on and read some of the verses that come after our reading today from Micah, starting at verse 8. Quote, "Do not rejoice over me, O enemy. because when I fall, I shall rise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord will be light to me. I can't help but think of isn't that a Katy Perry song? I know that's, like I Will Rise or something like that. Anyway, sorry, random aside, but that's where my mind went. But I love that. Do not rejoice over me, O enemy, because when I fall, I shall rise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord will be light to me. Who is a God like you, pardoning iniquity and passing over the transgression of the remnant of your possession? Right? When we mess up, God, who are you? You forgive us over and over and over again. God does not retain anger forever because God delights in showing clemency, says Micah. God will again have compassion on us. God will tread our iniquities underfoot. I hope you hear God's faithfulness in Micah's words today, and know that this faithfulness of God is for you. But also know, because of this faithfulness, God's faithfulness comes through people, just like you, right? It's not magical. It happens through bodies, through people, just like Micah. And Micah's biggest complaint then, in this whole writing that Micah has, is that there is religious practice, or maybe we could say spirituality and spiritual practices that are unaccompanied by ethical performance, right? A word that pops into my mind is fake, hypocritical, shallow, right? Words without actions, thoughts without actions that are meaningful, right? Or even shallow actions that don't actually make a difference, just so that people can say, "Look at me," right? It becomes, just shallow. And so, I would put it this way: if you're going to call yourself a follower and a lover of Jesus Christ, because that is what it is to be a follower of Jesus. It is to love Jesus, the person of Jesus, and love is an action, not a sentiment. If you're going to call yourself a follower of Jesus, a lover of Jesus, actions should come as natural consequences to those words, those confessions of loving Jesus, of calling yourself Christian, or whatever you want to title yourself as, right? Actions should come as natural consequences, right? Even Paul himself says in Galatians, love flows forth from faith, right? Good works flows forth from faith, from trust, from our confession of God, as Jesus as God, Jesus as Lord. As Jesus himself said about this sense of we being this faithful God for others, right? It's kind of paradox, right? When we're unfaithful, God is faithful, but God is faithful through the people that happen to be faithful when the rest of the people are not. Jesus echoes this sentiment from Micah in his own words when Jesus says in Matthew, right? Let your light so shine before others that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Jesus says in Matthew, you are the light of the world. Micah says, hey, when I sit in darkness, the Lord will be light for me. Jesus, who is God, says, you are the light of the world. There's a tension there, right? God doesn't come magically, as like a ghost or some sort of ethereal way, but embodied. God comes through people like you, through people like Micah, through people like Moses, through people like, Abraham, etc. You are the light that shines in the darkness of this world by the grace of God. You are answers to prayer waiting to happen. And if you feel like, oh man, like that's not me right now, then know that somebody out there is for you. And so, keep an eye open and an ear open. And as you wait and you long, know that God answers through people. So be looking for him. I hope that you can be one of them for somebody today. God give you lives, words, and actions to strive for unity, justice, and peace in your life. And I'll end by asking, where might you minister? Because that's what I'm talking about. This is ministering, showing up for people, being the light in the darkness of their lives, in their hard moments, arriving as God's light and love for people, because God is minister, and God ministers through people like you and me. How might you minister and bring healing and unity, in your life to the people around you? What does that look like for you? It's going to be different for everybody. God help you answer that question, because we need ministers right now. As Jesus said at the beginning of this harvest tide, the harvest is plenty, the laborers are few. Therefore, ask God to send out laborers into the harvest. We could just exchange the word laborer for minister, right? Go minister to people. Go love them. Go be their light in a dark and dreary world. All right, on to Revelation chapter 2, verses 1 through 7. To the angel of the church in Ephesus, which is now about modern-day Turkey, write, these are the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his hand, who walks among the 7 golden lampstands. I know your works, your toil, and your patient endurance. I know that you cannot tolerate evildoers. You have tested those who claim to be apostles, but are not, and have found them to be false. I also know that you are enduring patiently and bearing up for the sake of my name, and that you have not grown weary. But I have this against you, that you have abandoned the love you had at first. Remember then from what you have fallen. Repent, that is, turn around. Turn back and do the works that you did at first. If not, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place, unless you repent. Yet this is to your credit. You hate the works of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. Let anyone who has an ear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. To everyone who conquers, I will give permission to eat from the tree of life that is in the paradise of God. Here ends the reading. Now, as I was saying earlier, there is a video link in the description to this video about the book of Revelation. I encourage you to watch it. I watched through it once. I'm always very cautious to share other information about the book of Revelation because there's a ton of bad theology on the book of Revelation. But this video is pretty good, so please watch it. Now back to my thoughts, and that might include that video again here. So friends, here we are in the book of Revelation. It's going to come up today and tomorrow and possibly more in the Daily Revised Common Lectionary. And in my opinion, and this is grounded in all the bad theology, this is the most misunderstood, mistaught book of the Bible, and not because it's like this terribly difficult thing to understand. Yes, there is mystery in it, but it's not that hard to understand. What makes it seemingly so hard to understand is all the bad theology and fear-mongering and using this book as a weapon so that others can claim that the world is ending, the sky is falling, and that only they, whoever they are right, and everyone else is wrong, and then they can cut themselves off from the world at best, and at worst, they can chastise or even harm those who don't believe exactly as they do, right? It's just scary what people do with this book. Because what they'll say is all who don't believe as they do are bringing the end of days, and are servants of the beast, and, whatever. It just kind of makes me want to vomit. And so this book gets smeared so badly by Hollywood and bad theology. Martin Luther, this was one of Martin Luther's favorite books of the Bible because of the hope and the life and the victory that it speaks to at the very end. If you want to know what the book of Revelation is about, just read the last 2 chapters. It's like any other book. Read the conclusion, and then you'll know kind of what the story is leading up to and how to get there. Because, again, Hollywood and bad theology just smear this book. The beauty, the hope, and the goal of God to give life to all, not just people, all creation, through Jesus, and through Jesus' sacrifice, not through violence, not through some, mystical, we know the right stuff and you don't, so we're going to get whisked away while everybody's left behind Oops, I mentioned the Hollywood jargon garbage right there, right? In the process of all this smearing, the beauty of this book gets ruined. And yes, there are confusing words and language and things like that. But again, like if you take nothing else away from this video about the book of Revelation, is that it is a book meant to give hope and speak to God's desire to give life to all. Even when the world feels like it's full of beasts and dragons and terrible, awful things, in the end, God, through Jesus, wins the victory for us, period. The end. End of discussion. And so at this point I'll say, if you have been treating this book, that is the book of Revelation, as a future-telling device or a weapon to shame or shun others, first, I would ask you to jettison this nonsense from your brain, please. I beg you, as someone who loves you. Jettison this nonsense from your brain. Because I, right now, am not trying to fearmonger you. I am not trying to shun you or shame you or anyone else. I want you to walk away inspired, to feel like God desires to give you victory. Right? That's an encouraging word. So please jettison the nonsense of future telling and using this book as weapon to shame and shun others. Let it go, please. That's the first thing. And then be open to taking on a fresh view of this beautiful book and gift of God that seeks to give hope and life to those who are hurting. That's the whole point of this book. Second, watch the link. Just watch the link. If you're a multimodal learner like me, it uses visual, it uses audio, and it has words in the visuals. So like you're it's kind of multi-sensory, which is great. It does a pretty good job of describing the book of Revelation. Also, if you're a part of my church locally, I've got a DVD from my professor, Craig Kester, who describes in about a half an hour a pretty good synopsis of the book of Revelation as well. And unfortunately, by the time we got to that, when I was doing that series, it was just me and one other person. So we didn't really get to share that good stuff with many. But I do have it, and so we can do that. And for you out there that are like, Pastor, I'm just watching this video and I'm not watching anything else, I'll leave you with this sentence from the introduction of my study Bible. If another video is just going to be too much for you. And again, it's from this Bible, right, giving credit where it's due, the New Oxford Annotated Bible. It's a great study Bible. Many other study Bibles are a bunch of garbage. Again, bad theology. Another good one is the HarperCollins Study Bible. So this one or that one are pretty good. And it says this about the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation takes sides in a battle over sovereignty, where the Roman emperor competes with God and Christ for the allegiance of the faithful. That is the crux of the narrative of Revelation, right? The beast, the dragon, all of it, the Babylon, the whore of Babylon, like all of that just equals Rome, right? And the emperor, right? Competes with God and Christ for the allegiance of the faithful. And we hear that in the reading today, right? Like, you were doing so good, but here's what you're doing wrong. Be faithful to Jesus. All right, so back to the quote. So Rome competing for faithfulness with God and Jesus. Warning that those who worship the emperor, symbolized by the beast, will suffer ultimate defeat. Right? He's like, it's hard for you people. You're going to want to just comply with Rome and, give up on following Jesus because it's probably a lot easier, the path of least resistance. However, if you give in to the quote-unquote beast and do this, right, ultimately you're going to face defeat. And then the book urges, quote, to hold fast to the faith of Jesus and to share in the paradoxical victory of his death and resurrection. So paradox means that, like, it means life from death. That's the Christian paradox. How can life come from something that seems to be the opposite of life, right? Life from death. light out of darkness, right? We've used some of that imagery today. God is paradoxical. In Lutheran theology, that also often comes as a both and, right? So like we people are both sinner and saint. Anyway, but yeah, paradox. And so in Revelation, that paradox is that victory comes not through violence and power, but rather through weakness, mercy, and sacrifice. Which is a very hopeful message, because what's happening to the Christian people in Revelation? They're being persecuted. They don't have any power. And, the writer of Revelation is saying that this is who Jesus is, and Jesus has the ultimate victory through this same merciful, meek stance. And so as you continue to trust in Jesus by living into this truth and loving throughout the midst of it, instead of getting violent or falling away from faith, victory will be yours, just as it was for Jesus. All right, that's in the video. I'm going to stop talking. I'll use my last notes here. Victory in new life comes not as we berate, belittle, and prop ourselves up as somehow more faithful than others, because that's often what people do with the book of Revelation. Victory, rather, comes as we sacrifice our own life mercifully in order to love and give life to others, just as Jesus does for us, right? So that they might see Jesus in us. Let your light so shine. So that they might see Jesus in us, turn to the loving Jesus they see in us, and live. And we make these sacrificial acts of love for all of those around us, I would say, including wearing masks. That's a sacrificial act of love. Because God promises us final victory over the beasts and evils of our day too. That's why we sacrifice for others, because we trust that God will give us the victory. Though they take my life, though they take your life, just as they did to Jesus, in the end, God will give us an even greater new life. Behold, says the King from the throne, I am making all things new. Right? That's Revelation for you, folks. So as we battle the beasts of pandemic, using Revelation imagery here, as we battle the beasts of white supremacy and racism and division and partisanship, poverty and inadequate health care and so much more, the promise of God in the book of Revelation is that in the end, God will make all things new. And life for all will win. Life for all will win over death from the beasts that we face, even if we have to face death ourselves in order to gain this life that God will give us. There's that paradox. So have hope, dear friends. God and life will win the day. Jesus and Revelation say so. Peace be with you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.